in my journey back in 2004, the reason we started the Budo Ryu Kai is because as I was going through my training in ninjutsu and bujutsu and all whatever other jutsus we were doing, I was doing at the time, whether it's kenjutsu, jujutsu, taijutsu, etc. I found out really quick when I was reading some of the scrolls and doing my personal research and looking into all these different things that what they were saying they were doing, they're not doing. And they're talking about the way of the samurai, and no one was doing it. They're talking the words, and then the art that they did wasn't representative of what the philosophy they were talking about. Same thing, I would see different ninjutsu schools or ninpo organizations at the time. They were talking about ninjutsu and ninpo or ninpo taijutsu or whatever they were discussing, and then their philosophy of ninja or shinobi no mono did not match, you know, what the physical techniques they were doing. There was something off. It's like they were talking about old philosophy, but then when they did the physical combatives and everything, it was something more like what was good for the time, right? What they could make money on. So it was one of those little deals, right? And then you go and you start reading books like the Hagakure or the Book of Five Rings or, you know, the Shoninki or whatever it is that you're reading, and you're like, okay, well, this is what's written by an actual samurai or a ninja, and then you see what they're doing. It's like, this doesn't make sense. So in 2004, I decided to I walked away from all of my teachers, and I didn't mean any disrespect in any way. I just said, I just don't believe through my personal research and looking at all these different organizations and everything that I was involved with, I just didn't believe that they were teaching it in the way that it should be. They weren't teaching it in a warrior way. So in 2004, I created my own organization. We called it the Budo Ryu Kai, meaning School of the Warrior Way, and we go down that road. Now, many people look at different traditions and different training much differently. Some people look at the tradition as the legitimacy of a lineage. I never really cared so much about that. And up front, I'll tell you guys up front, I'm really not that big into the lineages and all that. I don't believe anyone's lineage to be true. I think a lot of people, when they develop their own lineages and things like that, they go back so far, and then from there they start connecting themselves to some god or some deity, or they went up a mountain and they starved themselves forever, and they got some enlightenment from a bird, and then they had this, they got a special technique they found by watching an animal. Like, you start looking at all Koryu, and it's like there's a point where you're just like, okay, the lineage is a lesson. It's full of philosophy. It has legends. It has stories. And this particular school of war, or this particular Ryuha, is connecting itself to those legends or those stories or those whatever, right? So I personally never cared so much about that. What I did is when I started the Budo Ryu Kai in 2004, what I wanted to do was find the traditions that I felt helped me as an individual become the martial artist that I was. And then from there, that's what I started teaching. One of the big questions that I get from the 7 traditions is, well, if you're the Soke of Tomoryu Shinobi Jutsu, which I am, the 21st Soke of Tomoryu, why don't you just teach Tomoryu? Okay, well, quick answer is I started the Budo Ryu Kai in 2004. I became Soke of Tomoryu in 2005. So because of my will and my kind of me getting outside the box and standing against the world and saying, no, the way you're doing Koryu is wrong. And I started my own organization in 2004. I think that, I don't know what the word I want to use is just me doing that, standing up for what I believe in. I think that helped to a certain degree of me getting Soke-ship within 2005. Right, so the easy answer is I started Budo Ryu Kai 2004. 2005, I got Minkyo Kaiden and Soke-ship in Tomoryu. So that was a little bit later. They didn't happen at the same time. I started the Budo Ryu Kai in 2004 because I felt everyone was just doing it wrong, and I thought that was a disrespect to the traditions that they claimed to be teaching. Right. So the 7 traditions aren't really based to any one set family. In fact, they're all kind of splintered off. They were the ones that I felt helped me the most. They were also the 7 that I felt helped the most distance in fighting. Like, if you're really close to each other and you're grabbing, then you need jujutsu. You need to have grappling within your arts, whether it's stand-up or on the ground, right? You need joint locks and controlling, so we have Tenjin Ryu Jujutsu. If you're in close quarters and you're doing close quarter combatives and you're striking really quick and in tight spots, well, we need Kempo. So we have Kokoru Kempo, right? If you take that distance from Jujutsu to Kenpo and you go a little bit further out where you're using striking or Kopo-jitsu techniques or bone breaking techniques, now we have Koto Ryu Kopo-jitsu, right? You take one more step out and you get somewhere and you have a little bit more distance between you where you can't really touch your opponent. They might be stepping back or stepping into a strike. Now we have Gyoko Ryu or Koji-jitsu, the art of distance, right? So if you look at the traditions, each one also, not that any of them are so set to a specific distance, but one of them tends to work very well in a specific distance to be more effective, right? So then as you go through, we also have Eishin Ryu, which is the school of swordsmanship. We have Tomo Ryu, which is ninjutsu, right? And then Togaku Ryu Ninpo Taijutsu. Common question I get in the next one is there a big difference between Tomo Ryu Shinobi Jutsu and Togaku Ryu Ninpo Taijutsu? Absolutely. They're not even close to being the same. They're not similar. And I think a lot of times people watch my videos and they might see us do Togaku Ryu Ninpo Taijutsu or some of the stuff from Togaku Ryu and then assume that some of the techniques that we do in Tomo Ryu are the same. Like they're just saying, oh, that's got to be Tomo Ryu because I'm doing it. They're not the same in any way. That we don't just stick to some of the traditions that we have. And the reason I think that's important is because there's a lot of organizations that they have, 7 traditions or 9 traditions or whatever, however many Ryuha, and they're teaching all these things, right? And I think they're so stuck into their tradition that they don't look outside the box. So there was all these different Ninpo organizations. Well, you shouldn't read that book, or you shouldn't read that book, or you shouldn't do that. You know what I mean? Like it was almost like, they talk about being open-minded, but it's ran almost very dictatorship, you know what I mean? And that didn't really go so good for me. So when I started the Budo Ryu Kai, we started the 5 areas of training, right? Go no Kekko, which one of them is Nihon Musha-kyu, which is the study of the scrolls. Because I do think it's important that you guys read any text that you think it's going to be good for you. I don't think it needs to be like, I'm going to tell you that you shouldn't read that book. Or, you can't study that particular manuscript. I think there's a difference between studying in a different organization, studying in 2 different organizations and studying in this organization and doing personal research by reading a book or a scroll. Those are 2 completely different things, you know what I mean? So that's one thing that I think separates us too, because although we do have the 7 traditions, I also think that it's important that you guys do understand the importance of looking at things like the Bansen Shikai or the Nippuden or the Shoninki or the Hagakure or the Book of 5 Rings or the Art of War, whatever book, Dinsho, scroll that we're talking about. I think those are very important things because those things are kind of outside of the 7 traditions, but it also helps shape your mind and your perception of historical Bujutsu and Ninjutsu. You know what I mean? And if you understand how it's supposed to be from a historical perspective, when you study the 7 traditions, then looking at the kata, you see them in a much different light. You see them, okay, this is supposed to fit here. What am I missing? But so many people that may study some of them may study traditions that like we have, even similar traditions, but they don't train them or practice them in a way that fits in history because they don't know how to fit those techniques in history. They're only doing them in a way that they were taught, which the way they were taught was probably more of a philosophical lesson, more so than it was a combative technique, right? So I think that's also something that makes us just a little bit different. I mean, I think the most obvious thing that we do in the Budo Ryu Kai that all Ninpo or the majority of Ninpo organizations don't is we spar. I'm really big on randori, sparring, grappling, and they don't do that, right? So when I started watching, when I was on my journey years ago before I developed the Budo Ryu Kai, I just got fed up with so many people saying one thing and doing another, taking their money and then not teaching them anything about true ninjutsu or true bujutsu. So that's the birth of the Budo Ryu Kai. That's why. And it had no disrespect to my teachers or anything like that. In many regards, I think a lot of times teachers teach people the way they were taught, and maybe they didn't know the whole truth either. Maybe it's just a rehash of what they were told. You know what I mean? I was lucky to be trained. I was lucky enough to be with teachers that knew what they were doing, whether it's Kobayashi Sensei or Murakami Sensei or the people that I was training with. They knew historical ninjutsu and bujutsu and samurai warfare, which is why I started the Budo Ryu Kai. So people who were truly interested in learning the warrior way, learning true ninjutsu, true bujutsu, they have a place to actually come and learn.